Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome. I think we almost have all found a seat now, so I appreciate your patience. I'm Bill McCarren. I'm the director of the Press Freedom Center at the National Press Club. And we're delighted that you all could be here tonight. It's an amazing crowd for a showing of this great film, Who Killed Shireen? This is a work by Zeteo, which is a new and innovative company. And directly after the film, which is about 40 minutes, there's going to be a panel discussion of about 1 hour. And we're pleased that joining us for that panel discussion are people who were centrally involved in the making of the film, or who knew Shireen and have some important contributions to make to the discussion. So I know you'll enjoy that. So at the end of the films, take a little stretch, but don't go away, because I think the discussion will be important and valuable. This is one case. It's a case of a journalist, a Palestinian American woman, but there's so much more meaning involved in the case. And for so long, we did not have new information or progress. And I am personally grateful, and I know all of you are, to the team that put this together from Zeteo to help us make some progress for Shireen and her family, and for all our understanding of what happened in this event. So please participate in this. This is about you. Please enjoy the film and hang around for the discussion. Thank you. Well, thank you. And this part of the program is being recorded and will be live streamed later. So for those who are on the live stream, I want you to know that we've just seen the film, and the room erupted with applause at the end. It was a moving response. And I want to congratulate Dion, Mehdi, and everybody at Zeteo who put this project together. And I'd like you to Thank you. I wanted the people who are watching to hear that. What a powerful film. And Mehdi, I wanted to start with you, if that's okay. It's a relatively new platform that you're running. What were you trying to achieve with this project, and how do you feel when you see it up on a screen, getting to a crowd like this, being appreciated and understood and valued?
It's a great question. Thank you, Bill. Thank you to the Press Freedom Center, National Press Club, for having us here today. Thank you all for turning out on a weekday night, on a hot day. I think it was raining and thundering during that film. Appreciate you all coming out. And look, I'm just going to say something. First of all, Zeteo commissioned and produced this film. The film was made by District Bear Films. I think Connor Powell and Tia Bawi are here tonight, so give them some love as well. Connor. And when they came with this pitch, and when Dion pitched this film, we had already put out one documentary, Israel's Real Extremism, which was made last year. And when I set up Zeteo, we're only a year and a bit old, as you said. And I wasn't planning to be doing lots of documentaries. We just aired our third, Gaza Doctors Under Attack, which we bought after the BBC turned it down, or rejected it. So at that point, I wasn't planning to do a second documentary, but the pitch was so compelling from Dion. And look, the reason Zeteo exists is to do stuff like this, is to platform films and voices that aren't being heard and seen elsewhere. I will say that when Dion said, we're going to go find the soldier who killed Shireen, in my head I thought, okay, if you say so. But he did. And they did, they pulled it off. I thought I was going to do it anyways. I said, let's commission this film, even if we don't actually find the soldier. Just the journey and telling Shireen's story and seeing the Israeli and Biden administration cover-up is worth it. But they actually went and found the soldier with all the twist of him being dead, and credit to Dion and the team's journalism and hard work. But look, that's what it's all about. That's why we did this film, and I do want to give a shout out also. Who here is a Zeteo subscriber? So I will say two things. One, those of you not clapping, hang your heads in shame. Two, those of you who are clapping, thank you, because we could only make this film with your support. We are not corporate funded, we are not advertised about, we are subscriber funded. So you people in this room, you help make that film.
Yes, it's $72 a year. It's a bargain if you sign up now.
$6 a month.
Yeah,
what are you waiting
and anyway, good on you. The commercial part of the program is over now. So
that's what you think.
Yeah, no, I know, that's right. So,
liking this video? Then don't just watch, hit like, share, and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to Zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
Dion Nissenbaum and Jihan Abdalla and my dear friend Abderrahim Foukara at the end, all are going to be involved in this discussion. I'm going to start now with Dion. You set out to find the person who took the shot, who killed Shireen. What does it mean to you that you were able to discover that person? And how does it change the way you see the story?
Well, thank you to you and to the National Press Club and the Press Freedom Center for hosting this. And I do want to echo thanks to Mehdi and Zeteo, because there are fewer and fewer places that are willing to support this kind of journalism, and Mehdi and Zeteo is one of the few, and it really would not have happened without him and without Zeteo being out there. They've just aired this latest documentary on doctors from Gaza, which is incredible. And so it really is important for people to support this kind of journalism. For me, there were a lot of lessons about this. One of the things we talked about afterwards that was interesting was it was, in one way, hard to find him, but in another way, it was actually very easy to find him. And this was sort of a lesson in journalism that I don't think we see enough in coverage of Gaza. You know, everybody goes through official channels. You go to the IDF spokesperson, you know, and you get shut out. And the great thing about Israel is that it's a small country. Everybody knows everybody. And if you find the right people to talk, you can find out this information. And I don't think we see enough of that happening in covering Gaza, talking to the Israeli soldiers that are in Gaza, talking about what's happening. You're seeing some of it come out from Haaretz and 972 and some other places, but in the Western media, there's not enough people doing the kind of journalism like this, where you actually put some skin in the game to find out what's happening. That was really one of the lessons to it. This story was personal, particularly for Fatima. People were friends with Shireen. We wanted to see why no one was held to account, you know, why the Biden administration didn't do more to find out who killed the first American journalist by Israeli forces. And the story is still unfolding. We do have more revelations we expect actually out of this in the coming days. And this is a story that still is in the process of being told. There still needs to be justice for Shireen. There are ways that people can be held to account. Ali Samoudi, as we said, is in prison now. He was arrested a week before the film came out. He's being held without charge. The Israeli military admits they don't have any evidence to hold him, and they are still holding him. We'd like to see him released. This is a very live story, and it's important that we keep a focus on it.
What's the gap between the time you talked to Ali in the movie and the time he's going to prison?
We talked to him in January of this year, and he was arrested in April. He's a well-known, established, respected journalist in Jenin. He was shot and injured. Yeah. I don't think there's a correlation because he came out before the film came out, but it was a week before the film premiered.
For me, knowing the shooter, who the shooter was, and that it was in this elite unit that you discovered, changed the entire story for me. I didn't have any more information than anyone else did, but I was, in my head, this was maybe a kid who was pressed into service, who was not trained, who was, some form of accident, because that's the human spirit. You want that to be the outcome, right? This is a unit that kills with intention and precision. This is a totally different thing for me when I'm seeing this take. So it was full of meaning, I thought, in terms of just the whole narrative of this story. And it was, amazing journalism, and it's uplifting. This is National Press Club. It's uplifting to see journalism doing this, And I agree with you, there should be more of it.
Yeah, he was a sniper. He was a 20-year-old sniper. It was his first combat duty in the West Bank. But we talked to American military officials, and the Israeli soldier we talked to in that film said it was not proper procedure to take that shot. This is one of the things that we want to talk about, is 200 meters away. There was no gunfire coming from there. It was not the proper shot. He should have been disciplined. There should have been some people held to account for what happened. There should have been changes in rules of engagement, because Israel said that was a fine shot to take. And these are all things that should, I think, happen that have not happened.
We don't know this, but what do you think? Is the report that is classified, the U.S. government report, do we think that contains information about this shooter?
The report does not, no, it has nothing about the shooter. The Israelis refused to provide any information for it, so it's not in there. And there are things in that report about the American conclusions on Israel's use of force. I don't think release of that report is going to actually provide a lot more insight. It will provide some perspective on the American view of the permissiveness of Israeli military operations in the West Bank, but as the American official in the film says, the initial conclusion was that she was intentionally targeted, and it should have been able to see that she was suppressed. But before that report was published, they changed that conclusion to say it was unintentional. So that's what the report will show, but what we know is that the initial conclusion was the exact opposite.
And there's no confirmation going to come for your stuff, second confirmation from that thing.
We'll see.
Okay. Intriguing. Jihan, you're the senior correspondent for the National, a English language publication in UAE. You knew Shireen. Tell us about her. What was it like working with her? How do you feel when you see the portrayal of her in this way in this film?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Jerusalem like Shireen. I'm a Palestinian Christian like Shireen. So we come from the same tight-knit community in Jerusalem. We knew her parents who passed away, and I still know her brother and his children and so on. Shireen, I used to work for Al Jazeera at the time as well. Yeah, so as you said, you were mentioning, Dion, the tight-knit, the small community. Shireen was probably the most well-known Palestinian female, certainly. She was well-liked by everybody. She took Palestinians everywhere in Palestine. She was there, she was the voice. She went everywhere that we couldn't go because of the conflict. And, I think, and she remained, and yet she was so humble, I went to the same hairdresser as her, and she would be there like everyone, like waiting for her turn, and would put up with the small talk. She never, asked for special treatment or anything like that. She still hung out with her school friends. She went to a girls' school in Jerusalem, and she still hung out with the same 3-4 girlfriends that she had always hung out, even in her 50s. And so I think I don't think she wanted to be a celebrity in that sense. She loved talking to Palestinian people and telling their stories. And I think it so happens that there was a conflict there, and she was sort of thrust in the middle of having to report on a conflict. She loved her job immensely and loved her people immensely. And it hurts me very much that this has happened to her. I woke up I was here in DC when the day she was killed, and I saw it when I woke up. It was already afternoon. It had already happened. First thing I did was call my mother. I said, "Is this true?" I didn't even say, nothing came out. Nothing came out of her voice. She couldn't say yes. It was just tears. It was all, she was choking. I could hear Al Jazeera in the background. And it was an intense moment of just pure grief, immense grief. In my heart, I felt that, if this can happen to Shireen, nobody is safe. I think that, having grown and raised in that conflict, we create these layers of protections around ourselves. But I think seeing this happening to Shireen, it felt like there was nothing left. All the layers that we had created around ourselves, by being an American citizen, or being a Christian, or being a middle class, or avoiding these areas, so on. All these, or the vest, the metaphorical, press vest, all of those things. Nothing can protect you from this reality. And the reality is a brutal occupation that it targets everyone. And trying to make sense of that. And I commend you, Dion, for trying to make sense of this.
Thank you. Abderrahim, you also knew Shireen. And in addition to your journalistic work, you're a representative of Al Jazeera here in DC. So the company worked to try to make progress on this and to support the family and to move the needle with the government. Tell us a little bit about that process and how it feels when we see that ultimately answers are coming, but from journalism, not from government.
Sure, thanks, Bill, for making me part of this panel. If I may just articulate a couple of things following what Jihan has just said about Shireen. I worked with Shireen twice in the West Bank. And for me, that was an opportunity to see something that we don't often see in television journalists, because what I saw, the Shireen that I saw on the screen and the Shireen that I saw or met for the first time in person, there was no discrepancy. Shireen on the screen was the same as Shireen in her daily life, and in the way that she interacted with her colleagues and the way she interacted with Palestinians outside the job. But the most revealing encounter with her was actually here in Washington, when she came to help us with the election coverage. I believe that was in 2012, when 2008 or 2012, something like that. And the amazing thing about that was when we walked into the office, you wouldn't know that she's actually in the office. She liked to keep a low profile, which is not very common among us, who have a screen persona. She didn't seem to care about that. She seemed to care about the content of the story that she did. And, for a little bit of levity, when she was here, in addition to the political stories that she was assigned as part of the election coverage, she chose quirky stories, Like one particular story that I remember she did on how Americans treated their dogs and how much money they spent on their dogs. You know, sending them on a vacation to Miami and traveling first class and things like that. And she didn't do that to berate Americans or to mock them. She did that story, that kind of story, because she had this amazing curiosity in her. But also, she did it because she wanted Arabs to see a slice of American life. And you know, she had that kind of approach. When it came to covering Israel-Palestine, obviously she always did both sides of the story. However, the fundamental premise from which she departed when doing those stories was that this is a people living under occupation. I mean, that part of it for her didn't need two sides of the story. But when she took one slice of that particular reality, yes, you know, she gave time to both sides to express what they wanted to express. And just a final thought, I started my journalism career in radio with the BBC in London, Voice of Empire.
Hear that in the voice.
And we were trained to deliver in a certain way, a certain placid way, so to speak. And when I joined Jazeera, I did my first report making use of that training. And then one of the editors called me and he said, your report factually is very good, but you have to remember that you're no longer now in radio, you're no longer in BBC, you have to inject a little something else into it. Shireen had found the perfect tempo in terms of stating the story without actually trying to arouse the viewer who will receive that story. Now, to circle back to the question that you asked, and also to what we've seen in the film, I mean, the film, it was obvious. The film is so methodical in the way it moved, you know, from one part to another to reach that conclusion and reveal who had actually killed Shireen Abu Akleh, a very crucial part of the puzzle. Jazeera's position, and the position of others as well, has been, it's not just the soldier who fired the shot, it's the whole ecosystem, you know, in which the firing of that shot happened. There's a hierarchy. It is assumed that the order to shoot came down from the high, came down sifted through the channel, but also the political cover that was provided. So this part of the story is crucial. It's done, and I think the story is not over yet because we still need to know the larger picture in which the killing of Shireen happened, and that's always been the position of Al Jazeera, in addition to lending all the possible support that, you know, a news organization could lend to a reporter and the family of the reporter when they are killed.
Thank you. Mehdi, did you want in on this?
I did. Just one other point. I mean, you mentioned the political cover. And the political cover, for me, this film, as someone who commissioned this film, I'm an executive producer on the film, for this is a film of two stories. This is a film about who killed Shireen, and the answer is Alon Skagio, Israeli sniper, with the support of the Israeli military. But it's also a film about what Joe Biden did. And for me, that is one of the most painful part of that film. I've watched this about 30 times now, and I just watched it for the 31st time or whatever it is. And you know the line that bothers me in this film the most, more than anything any Israeli says, is when Ayal Hulata, the national security advisor, and Dion are sitting in DC, you know, after he tells us that ridiculous line about Israel investigating soldiers. He says, Joe Biden never raised this issue with Prime Minister Bennett. And for me, that's literally from the horse's mouth. That is Prime Minister Naftali Bennett's national security advisor saying, you guys didn't care. And that is a big problem. Why would Israel care about killing an American if the Americans don't care about killing an American? Joe Biden famously said when an Iranian-backed proxy group killed American soldiers in Jordan, if you harm an American, we will respond. They killed an American journalist and he did nothing. And for me, that is a big part of this story, and it will, I hope, continue to haunt him as much as what he didn't do on Gaza.
And in March of this year, we had a program here where we examined, Dion references this a little bit in the movie, firing upon journalists in Lebanon by an Israeli tank.
Yes.
Hussam
Abdullah.
Yes, Hussam Abdullah killed a Reuters cameraman.
Yes.
7 journalists, all injured. 2 tank shells fired at this group of 7 journalists, some from Al Jazeera, some from AFP,
Yep.
and Reuters. And then the ground was strafed with a Browning .50 caliber machine gun from the tank. One of the people in that came to visit us and talk. His name was Dylan Collins, and he, there are others too, but Dylan is an American. His dad lives out in Baltimore. I think he was born in Vermont. So within a pretty short window, they're killing Shireen. This is happening, the IDF. Then the IDF is firing on another group that includes an American citizen. And the takeaway is that, and nothing is done. No, I don't know, but I'm sure this conversation is the same. This was not raised by the American side, right? So this is tragic and cumulative for the journalists of Gaza, which is a point made in the
Hollen.
In the movie.
Well, Chris Van Hollen very explicitly says that he believes a lot of those journalists who've been killed in Gaza, more than 200, would be alive today if Israel had not been basically told that we don't care if you kill journalists.
Right.
And that's the problem.
There was a message there. If somebody wanted to take that message, it was pretty obvious. And when we did that program that I'm talking about, I don't think there ever was a program in Washington to examine that incident. You know, it just wasn't a subject of interest. I mean, there was news coverage about it, but we know about it, but it wasn't, you know. And the Shireen case, we would, you know, talk about it once a year. We would do an event. It was not getting the attention that it deserved. I would just say, Congressman Carson of Indiana put a bill up saying we should, any American that's killed overseas, that must be investigated. It didn't get any real traction. You know, this is not, I'm done, but there's a pattern here that is upsetting and trying to do it the right way, which is to petition your government when your colleagues, your citizens, your fellow journalists are being killed or targeted, is a terribly unsatisfying experience. As you found, Connor found, and I'm sure, you know, Al Jazeera found when trying to press these issues.
To me, that's one of the key points here is this
Go ahead.
gradual erosion in Israel's respect for press freedoms. I think that you can trace back not just to Shireen, but I think that was a formative point. So the Biden administration doesn't care. They ask for rules of engagements to be changed. Israel says, F you, we're not going to do that. Everything was fine. And you see Hussam Abdullah is killed. The Israeli military has not released any investigation.
No report, yeah.
No report has been released 2 years later. American is injured in that account. And you see, you know, depending on how many you count, 180, 200, 220 journalists in Gaza killed, making Israel the most dangerous country in the world for journalists now. And when Shireen was killed, they said, we don't target journalists. we're not that kind of country. But now, actually, in Israel, they do target journalists. And now they say, they label them combat propagandists. They've directly targeted journalists that work with militant groups, and they say, we can kill them because they are combat propagandists. And then the chief Israeli spokesperson puts out a tweet at that time saying, wearing a vest that says pressed does not make a terrorist a journalist. So now you're sending a message as the Israeli military that if you see someone in a press vest, assume they're a terrorist, basically, and make them a legitimate target. So if you put on that vest in Israel, and certainly in Gaza, that provides no protection for you anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think from having worked in the West Bank and in Jerusalem, it felt there was a lot of things happening. But in terms of the Israeli army, a lot of it seemed like, you were talking about them not being trained enough. I mean, a lot of them are, being that the Israeli military is mandatory, you have 18, 19-year-olds. But on one hand, they're not very trained. On the other hand, they operate with such impunity, with a wide sort of no directive as to how they have to operate when it comes to civilians, when it comes to journalists, and so on. So, I mean, my experience was there was a whole range. Sometimes soldiers would ignore us completely, and sometimes they would taunt us, fire non-lethal weapons at us like tear gas, just to get laughs out of it. So completely unprofessional behavior, in the quote unquote sense. And then sometimes, complete disregard. When they find out, for instance, that it would really upset them to see if a Palestinian, you can't just a Palestinian wearing a vest and suddenly you have different treatment. No. It's like, you're a Palestinian, you know that. You wearing a vest doesn't change that. And they made sure to let us know that just because you're wearing a vest, this doesn't mean anything to me. And like I said, being as they are, confrontational and so on, they would clearly spell that out for us. And over the years, it's just been getting worse. It's not like, it's one thing. I haven't been back in a few years. I imagine it's just been progressively getting worse. And, you talk about snipers and we talk about all these complicated weapons and so on. The violence is, you also talked about this whole system. The violence is very much the method. I don't want to sound overly academic, but the use of violence is very much the way that of establishing control over the West Bank, over the people, the roads, and so on. It's not random. It is very much purposeful. It has sometimes the violence is the means and ends in and of itself, right? So you might say, why Shireen? There isn't the exercising violence is the end, is the means and the ends in order to exercise control and authority over the areas, and that's why Jenin looks the way it does. It's because of the violence. It is, violence it is scary. It has consequences, and it is the way that the Israeli army exerts its control. So I think.
I just wanted to add something of what you've just said now. It has been said in the film that over 200 journalists have been killed in Gaza. And obviously, there's the principle that the sanctity of life should always apply, whether the journalist is Jewish, Muslim, Christian, or something else. But what we have witnessed with the case of Shireen Abu Akleh, she's Palestinian, she's Arab, she's Palestinian, she's American, but she's also Christian. And I'm saying this because my mind is circling back to something that Ted Cruz said way back in 2014 when a group of Arab Christians from the Holy Land, from the land of Jesus, came to visit Washington. And he spoke to them and he told them, if you don't support Israel, you cannot be real Christians. And for the Biden administration to have actually not pushed for revealing the name of the soldier who did the killing, not to have really pushed for any kind of serious accountability. When it comes to an American citizen who happens also to be a Christian, I think it is doubly problematical in this particular case, because there are a lot of journalists out there, particularly in the Middle East, who are now saying, if Shireen, the American, the Christian, has not moved the Biden administration to do what it was supposed to do, what chance do I have? And I'm not Christian. I'm most of the journalists who've been killed in Gaza are Muslim, and it's such a dangerous situation, and it just casts aspersions on anything that the Biden administration may have said, that a journalist is a journalist regardless of which part of the world they are in. If you'll allow me just one quick thought. The other problem that I always raise is that when you go to the Middle East, and I'm using the Middle East just as an example, you can extrapolate to other parts of the world, but you go to the Middle East and the focus and interest of people in the Middle East is in Arab journalists. A lot of talk about Shireen Abu Akleh and other Arab journalists who've been killed or imprisoned or whatever ordeal they've gone through. You come here to the United States, and it's about Austin Tice when that happens. It's about Ivan Gershkovich when that happens. Shireen is a unique case because there's interest in her in the Middle East, but there has been quite a bit of interest also here in the United States. She's a unique bridge in that sense. This is not to say that the coverage of Shireen and others has been adequate here in the United States, but she certainly has received a lot more attention than these 200 journalists who knows about them in the United States. They're just numbers, they're not names, they're not real journalists who've been killed.
Yeah, I know you want to go to the audience, I don't want to take up too much time, but one quick point on that, just to pick up on your identity point, is ultimately, and this is what I've discovered over the many years of covering this conflict, ultimately the Palestinian bit wipes out everything else, right? It doesn't matter if you're American, it doesn't matter if you're Christian, it doesn't matter if you're a journalist, you're a Palestinian. And that is the devaluing, dehumanizing prism through which Western media, Western governments unfortunately view this one people. Just this week, the President of the United States once again referred to Chuck Schumer as a Palestinian, as a pejorative. The only man I know who can be anti-Semitic and anti-Arab at the same time, right? But that is where we are now. And this is the problem. And this is why it reduces, why do we not care about the Palestinian being? Why is it that journalists, as Abderrahim pointed out, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner got very excited for Austin Tice and for Evan and for everyone else? We haven't seen those prominent CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS anchors make the same noise about not just Shireen, but about their colleagues being killed daily in Gaza. And there's only one answer to that question, because they're Palestinian. And I think we have to deal with that racism that's at the core of a lot of this.
That was also like striking to me, because the day that Shireen was killed, there was Palestinian journalists there at the scene,
Yep.
and they said she was killed by an Israeli soldier.
But they're not credible as far as
But they weren't credible, and then the Israeli military came out and said, no, she was killed by Palestinian militants, which was disproved within hours. Mm-hmm. But still, if you look, I go back and look at those stories all the time, and it says, Israel says that she may have been killed, and then they would say, like, the Palestinian Authority says this, but nothing from the journalists themselves, and that was also something that really bothered me to make exactly that point. And Fatima, to me, a lot of the most eloquent parts of this film is Fatima saying exactly that. Like, I'm a journalist, and I'm a Palestinian, and when I report, you should be able to trust it as much as if I report, and we don't see it happening.
Yeah, I was struck by what Ali said when you interview him as well, that this is a paraphrase, but he said something to the effect of, the purpose of the shooting was to silence all of us and have us withdraw, and which suggests a level of intent that I don't know if it's at that 20-year-old specific guy, but there's definitely a sense, easily seen, that coverage of this conflict is not welcome and being stopped by plan, right? And 200 cases, 10, I think, some of the agencies that investigate such things have been able to prove were intentional from what they've been able to get. Many of the other cases they haven't been able to prove, in part because they can't access this space. They can't go in. That's part of what's so interesting about the Shireen shooting and the shooting in Lebanon. In both those cases, there was a level of access to the events of the day, and in both of them, it looks pretty clear that the IDF has a policy of targeting journalists when it serves their interests. We can't know that as precisely with all of these other cases, but it sure feels like that's evident, and it well may be what's happened times 200. Before we move off the thing about government, because I felt like that didn't really go anywhere, we did ask somebody from the government to come here and join us and speak tonight. He wasn't able to join us in person, but he sent a video. If we have the video of Senator Van Hollen, who was in the movie, but he also had something he wanted to say. I wanted to play that and then see what we think about it coming out.
Hi, I'm Chris Van Hollen, and I'm proud to represent Maryland in the United States Senate. I'm sorry I can't join you in person, but I want to salute the Press Freedom Center for organizing this important gathering to both remember a legendary journalist and to demand justice in her killing. Shireen Abu Akleh was an extraordinary Palestinian-American journalist, a once-in-a-generation reporter, a trusted and beloved voice for over 2 decades. Her death was a loss for her loved ones and for the world. It's been over 3 years since her killing, and we still do not have justice. It's been over 3 years since her killing, and we do not have accountability. And this is unacceptable. For the past 3 years, I've been calling for the truth, pressing both the Biden and the Trump administrations and the State Departments in meetings, in letters, in hearings, and legislation. And throughout that time, the United States government has done no more than issue weak statements and minor admonishments. The State Department always says its top priority is to protect American citizens abroad, and they say they stand for press freedom. They have failed miserably in the case of Shireen. After Shireen's death, Secretary Blinken called for an independent investigation into her killing. That never happened. He also asked the Netanyahu government to review the IDF rules of engagement in the West Bank. That request went ignored without consequence. As I said in the documentary being screened before you today, in my view, it's clear that this lack of accountability has endangered and ultimately cost more lives, both American lives and Palestinian lives. Shireen once said, and I quote, "I choose journalism to be close to the people. It might not be easy to change the reality, but at least I could bring their voice to the world," unquote. She did that work until the very end. In her memory, we cannot rest until justice is done. I want to thank Dion and his team for producing this extraordinary documentary, Who Killed Shireen? And I also want to thank the National Press Club and the Press Freedom Center and all of you for your commitment to shining a light on Shireen Abu Akleh and the fight for justice and the fight for freedom of the press. Thank you and take care.
Okay, the point here is that that's his party he's talking about, right? He's talking about his own party. And Senator Van Hollen is on the Foreign Relations Committee. That's the kind of person that's going to have a lot of discussion with a Democratic administration, you know, with the NSC, with the State Department. And it's dispiriting to hear. And I will tell you, I've had conversations, I'm sure all of us have been able to have conversations with him where there's not 400 people here. You know, there's nobody there except for the two of us. And that's how he's going. He wants this stuff to work. It's troubling that we're in a system where you have some people that are trying to do things, not enough of them, but they can't seem to affect the system. The president will not call the Prime Minister of Israel and raise the issue. At that point, we break down.
Where are the other 99 senators? Is
Yeah.
the question.
No.
As American, so my colleague Prem Tucker, another reason for you to subscribe to Zeteo. I told you the commercial wasn't over. Prem did some great reporting this week. He was on Capitol Hill and he went up to a bunch of Republican senators. He said, "Can you tell me how many American citizens have been killed since October the 7th by Israeli forces?" And none of them could answer the question. Some of them weren't interested in the question. Susan Collins of Maine, a great moderate Republican senator, said, "I'm pro-Israel," and got in her car and drove off. Not interested in the fact that the answer is 6 American citizens have been killed. So this idea that you care about people abroad is absurd. Americans abroad don't have safety or protection if a particular military is killing them. And that should be a huge scandal in this country to line up alongside the multiple other scandals.
Yeah, well said. This questioner, someone handed me a note from asking, what do you hope viewers take away from the film beyond the fact of Shireen's death? I think it's a beginning. It feels like a beginning. It feels like this is a conversation we need to have in our country, and we're not there in manifest ways. We're not there yet. I think the film will help, but the dialogue is not fruitful, you know? I mean, you try, Mehdi tries, Al Jazeera is trying, but I don't think we're close. And I don't think Americans can answer the question, do you think it's a policy of the IDF to target journalists? Which to me is the question that is asked by this film. If not, if not explicitly, it's there. And I think we're getting closer to the answer there. I mean, I think I know the answer, but I think more of us need to encounter this because it is startling.
We want people to take away from this film something about Shireen, how important she was as a person, and this is a great panel because we have friends of hers there to talk about who she was as a human being and a journalist, what she meant to the region, to journalism. I think that's an important takeaway, and yes, we do see her killing as kind of the beginning of this erosion of press freedom with Israel, where they are targeting journalists and labeling them as combat propagandists, and it continues. And I've worked in Washington. I'm pretty cynical about, especially right now, the ability to affect change in Washington. The changes I would push for is to see, Ali Samoudi released, to see changes in Israel and how they interact with journalists, to reflect on their rules of engagement and their targeting of journalists, and how they are, Al Jazeera, of course, has now been banned and shut down in Israel and labeled a mouthpiece for Hamas. And I wrote to the Israeli military before this was happening and said, does that mean that you would now target Al Jazeera journalists because they're combat propagandists, and I'm still waiting for an answer to that. I would like to see Israel say something that, we believe in press freedom, and you don't see that happening anymore. You've silence on Issam Abdullah's case, silence on whether it's legitimate to target Al Jazeera journalists as combat propagandists. That's where I want to see some change. I don't see much change happening in Washington.
Well, Al Jazeera's lost many journalists, of course, in that conflict, and it's pretty clear in some of these cases that there was targeting related to your people.
Yeah. If I may say that this film is obviously extremely important in the US.
Yes.
It's extremely important for people in the Arab world for a slightly different reason. It's very important for people in the Arab world to see that this film was produced by Americans. I've been working for Al Jazeera since 2002. I covered the invasion of Iraq in 2003, all the protests that happened here, and similar events until recently. And that's always been, for me, front and center of my mind, how people in the Arab world see what happens here in the US. Because there's nothing, as we heard in different ways from Mehdi and Jihan and Dion, there's nothing more dangerous, not just to journalists, but in general, than the stereotype that everyone is exactly the same in a particular country or in a particular part of the world. It's very important for people in the Arab world to know that as much as they care about Shireen Abu Akleh as an Arab Palestinian journalist, there are Americans who are putting themselves on and their reputation on the line to uncover the truth of what happened to journalists like Shireen Abu Akleh. In the same way that there are Jews here in this country who are against the war in Gaza and they want an end to it. And I think these are arguments that are very important long term, for people to know. So I see this film, through that particular prism.
Yeah, I think, for the Biden administration, consoler in chief, apparently, but we saw him, in the war on Gaza, inability to show any compassion, towards Palestinian deaths. It was shocking. But then to see on top of that he's also unable to that it would extend towards American citizens as well, based on the fact, again, like you were saying, on who killed them. I think that part for me was disappointing, maybe a little shocking too, that you struggle to see the humanity of Palestinians, and also when they happen to be Americans as well. And so I think, I still have a lot of questions about that as a journalist, and I think it's important to continue to ask, why? Why is that? And I don't think we should ever accept that, under any circumstance.
What do we think Shireen would think of this film? I'm struck by the fact that journalism starts to provide an answer, some answers here, and that there's something about, I didn't know Shireen, I met her family, but there's something about who she seems to be that she would, in part, that she would like that.
I think, if I may say, probably it's difficult to know what a dead person would have thought about a particular situation, but just based on the things that I knew about Shireen when I interacted with her, because as I said at the outset, she wanted to be so low-key and understated in everything that she did. She would probably think, yes, I am a journalist who was killed by the forces of occupation. But at the end of the day, there are hundreds of others who've been killed. And therefore, the attention should not be so much on me, Shireen Abu Akleh, it should be on the others who have been trying to do the job of reporting in much more insidiously dangerous situations like in Gaza, for example. That's my speculation, what you would think.
Mehdi, final thoughts as we're getting to the end of the panel?
I would say that it's interesting what you said about journalism. It's a very hated profession right now. I think we're about, I think the only people less popular than us are lawyers, maybe, and politicians. But I do hold out hope for the fact that sometimes you can affect change through what we do on the screen or in print. We can have an impact. Just seeing what happened with our latest documentary, Gaza Doctors Under Attack, where it became a big story that the BBC wouldn't air it, and we were able to air that meant something. And I think getting change, putting pressure on the people in power, I mean, this is why we do what we do. And there's a lot wrong with journalism and journalists and the media, but I think nights like this are a reminder of what's right with journalism.
Earlier on, Dion, I heard Mehdi introduce you to somebody as the star of the film. You drove the narrative. You were one of the creative forces there. You're happy with what's on the screen. What are your hopes for what the film can be going forward?
Yeah, there's more to come. This is a story that's unfolding. The U.S. official in that film, we believe, is prepared to come forward and tell us more with his name attached, which will be a courageous act.
You're talking about the guy who's obscured in the...
Yeah. We think my understanding is he's preparing to come forward and talk more about what happened, and hopefully that will drive more calls for accountability. I've continued to speak with him. He's an incredible, credible person. One of the things he talks about is trying to sanction this Israeli unit for violations, which is under American law, you can stop funds to particular units for these kinds of crimes. That's something that could potentially happen. The Biden administration almost did it. I know there are U.S. officials in here that were involved in trying to make that happen. U.S. officials I know in this room who resigned over their frustrations with what happened, taking stands. So, this is a story that's still unfolding. Gaza's journalists are being killed, Palestinians are being killed every day, innocent Palestinians, and hopefully that will come to an end, and hopefully films like this can remind people of our common humanity. That's really been lost in this story, that empathy for women and children that are dying. And I hope that's just one of these, the story can remind people of our humanity and empathy for innocents trapped in war.
It's going to be our last word for tonight. Thank you. It's Dion Nissenbaum, who is the executive director?
Executive producer.
Executive producer, sorry. And it is Jihan Abdalla from the National. It is Mehdi Hasan from Zeteo, who's executive producer. And it is Abderrahim Foukara from Al Jazeera. Thank you all for joining us this evening.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to Zeteo.com. Your support matters.